The Dominican Republic is a land of vivid contrasts. It is a place where turquoise waters meet white sand beaches. It is a place where the rhythm of merengue and bachata fills the air. But, behind this postcard image lies a history of immense struggle and incredible resilience. This nation's story is not a simple one. It is a long and often painful journey. It's a story of conquest, of slavery, of revolution, and of tyranny. Yet through it all, the Dominican people have forged a powerful and unique identity. They have endured centuries of foreign domination and internal conflict. Their spirit remains unbroken, a testament to their strength and their will to survive and define their own destiny. To understand the Dominican Republic today, you have to look back. You have to understand the forces that shaped it. The island of Hispaniola, which the Dominican Republic shares with Haiti, was a crossroads of empires. It was the first permanent European settlement in the Americas. This fact alone set it on a course unlike any other in the region. The consequences of that first contact reverberate to this day. It was a collision of worlds that led to the near-total destruction of one civilization and the birth of a new, complex Caribbean culture. This essay will explore that journey, from the peaceful Tino people who first called this island home to the modern, vibrant nation that stands today. The narrative of this country is one of survival. It is about a people who have been tested by history again and again. They faced the Spanish conquistadors who sought gold and glory. They were caught in the middle of power struggles between European giants like Spain and France. They fought for their independence from their neighbors and from their own dictators. Each chapter of this history, no matter how dark, added another layer to the national character. The story of the Dominican Republic is therefore a story of endurance. It is a story about how a nation can be forged in the fires of adversity and emerge with a culture and a pride that is entirely its own. We will examine the key moments that define this nation. We will look at the arrival of Christopher Columbus and the establishment of Santo Domingo. We will explore the long fight for sovereignty, the brutal dictatorship of Rafael Trujillo, and the turbulent transition to democracy. Through it all, we will focus on the people themselves. We will see their resilience in the face of oppression, and their ability to create a vibrant culture filled with music, art, and community. This is the story of the Dominican Republic, a nation whose past is as dramatic and compelling as its beautiful landscapes. It is a story that deserves to be told and understood. Before the sails of European ships appeared on the horizon, the island of Hispaniola was a thriving world. It was known to its inhabitants as Quisqueya, meaning mother of all lands. The people who lived here were the Tino. They were a peaceful Arawak people who had migrated from the coastal regions of South America centuries earlier. Their society was well organized and sophisticated. They lived in villages called Ucayeks, which ranged from small settlements to larger centers that could house thousands of people. Their lives were deeply connected to the natural world around them. The sea provided fish, the fertile soil provided crops, and the forests provided materials for their homes and canoes. The Taino social structure was hierarchical. It was led by chiefs, known as caciques. These chiefs could be men or women, and their power was passed down through their mother's line. The society was divided into different classes, including nobles, priests, and commoners. They were skilled farmers. They cultivated crops like yucca, from which they made cassava bread as well as corn, sweet potatoes, and cotton. Their agricultural methods were advanced. They used a system of planting in raised mounds, called conucos, which improved drainage and protected the soil from erosion. This allowed them to support a large and healthy population across the island. Spirituality was central to Taino life. They were polytheistic, believing in a pantheon of gods and spirits known as zemis. These were not distant gods but active forces in the world. They were represented by idols made of wood, stone, or cotton. The Taino believed these zemis controlled everything, from the success of a harvest to the outcome of a journey. Religious ceremonies were important community events. They often involved music, dance, and the ritual use of tobacco. Their worldview was one of harmony between the human, natural, and spiritual realms. It was a balanced existence that had been sustained for generations, a world unprepared for the cataclysm that was about to arrive. Life for the Taino was not a simple, primitive existence. It was a complex and rich civilization. They had their own language, their own art, and their own traditions. They were skilled artisans, creating beautiful pottery and intricate carvings from wood and bone. They played a ceremonial ball game called batu in large courts located in the center of their villages. They navigated the Caribbean Sea in massive canoes, some capable of holding over 100 people. This was the world that existed before 1492. It was a vibrant and self-sufficient society, a kingdom of sun and sea that was on the verge of being shattered forever. In December 1492, Christopher Columbus and his fleet arrived on the shores of Quisqueya. He named the island La Isla Española, or Hispaniola. For the Tino people, this was a moment that would change everything. Initially, the encounter was peaceful. The Tino, led by their caciques, greeted the strange visitors with curiosity and generosity. They offered food, gold ornaments, and assistance. Columbus, however, saw something different. He saw a land rich in resources and a population that could be easily subjugated. He saw the potential for gold, for spices, and for converting souls to Christianity. The goals of the two groups were fundamentally opposed. The Spanish quickly established a settlement, La Navidad, on the northern coast. It was built with the help of the Tino after one of Columbus's ships, the Santa Maria, ran aground. When Columbus returned to Spain, he left a small group of men behind. Their greed and brutality quickly soured relations with the Tino. By the time Columbus returned on his second voyage, the settlement had been destroyed and the men killed. This event marked the end of any pretense of peaceful coexistence. The Spanish response was swift and brutal. The period of conquest had begun, and the island became the primary base for Spanish colonization of the Americas. In 1498, Columbus's brother, Bartholomew, founded the city of Santo Domingo on the southern coast. It would become the first permanent European city in the New World. Santo Domingo was the seat of Spanish power. It was from here that the Spanish crown administered its growing empire. The city boasted the first cathedral, the first university, and the first hospital in the Americas. But this progress came at a terrible cost. The Spanish imposed the encomienda system. This system granted Spanish colonists control over Tino land and labor. In practice, it was a brutal form of slavery. The Tino were forced to work in gold mines and on plantations under horrific conditions. The consequences for the Tino people were catastrophic. They faced forced labor, starvation, and violence. But even more devastating were the diseases brought by the Europeans. The Tino had no immunity to smallpox, measles, or influenza. These diseases swept through the population, wiping out entire villages. Within a few decades of Columbus's arrival, the Tino population, once estimated to be in the hundreds of thousands, had been reduced by over 90%. Their civilization was effectively destroyed. While some Tino heritage survives in the Dominican gene pool and culture today, their world was tragically lost to the violence and pathogens of the Old World. For centuries, Hispaniola was the jewel of the Spanish Empire, but its importance began to fade as Spain conquered wealthier territories like Mexico and Peru. The Spanish crown's attention and resources shifted elsewhere. The western part of the island became neglected and sparsely populated. This created an opportunity for other European powers. French pirates and buccaneers began to use the western coast as a base for their operations, preying on Spanish treasure ships. Over time, these temporary camps grew into permanent settlements. France saw a chance to challenge Spanish dominance in the Caribbean. The struggle for control of the island defined the colonial era. Spain, weakened and overstretched, was unable to effectively push the French out. In 1697, through the Treaty of Ryswick, Spain formally ceded the western third of Hispaniola to France. This part of the island became the French colony of Saint-Domingue. The eastern two-thirds remained under Spanish control as Santo Domingo. This division laid the foundation for the two distinct nations we see today, Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Saint-Domingue, fueled by the brutal labor of hundreds of thousands of enslaved Africans, became the richest colony in the world, producing vast quantities of sugar and coffee. The Spanish colony of Santo Domingo developed very differently. Its economy was less focused on large-scale plantations and more on cattle ranching and subsistence farming. Society was less rigidly stratified than in the French colony. While slavery existed, the relationships between people of Spanish, African, and Tino descent were more fluid. This environment fostered the creation of a unique Dominican culture. It was a blend of Spanish traditions, African spiritual and musical influences, and surviving Tino elements. This fusion, known as Criollo culture, became the bedrock of Dominican identity, distinct from both its Spanish rulers and its French-speaking neighbors. This period was marked by constant conflict and instability. The border between the two colonies was a frequent flashpoint. Spain and France were often at war in Europe, and these conflicts spilled over into the Caribbean. In 1795, Spain ceded the rest of the island to France as part of a peace treaty. However, French control was short-lived. The Haitian Revolution, a massive slave uprising that began in Saint-Domingue in 1791, would soon engulf the entire island. This monumental event would not only lead to the creation of Haiti, the first independent Black republic, but would also profoundly shape the Dominican Republic's own long and difficult path to nationhood. The Haitian Revolution sent shockwaves across the Americas. After years of brutal fighting, the revolutionaries in Saint-Domingue declared independence from France in 1804, creating the nation of Haiti. The leaders of the new nation viewed a divided island as a threat to their freedom. They feared that the Spanish and French could use the eastern side as a base to reinvade and re-establish slavery. In 1822, Haitian President Jean-Pierre Boyer marched his forces into Santo Domingo and unified the island under Haitian rule. For the next 22 years, the Dominican people lived under what they came to see as a foreign occupation. The Haitian occupation was a difficult period. The government implemented policies that were deeply unpopular with the Spanish-speaking population. They seized church property, which alienated the powerful Catholic Church. They imposed military rule and heavy taxes. Although the Haitians had abolished slavery, which was a positive step, their administration was viewed by many Dominicans as oppressive. A sense of national identity, separate from that of the Haitians, began to grow stronger. A secret society called La Trinitaria was formed. Its goal was to win independence for the Dominican people. Its leader was a young, idealistic intellectual named Juan Pablo Duarte. On February 27, 1844, the members of La Trinitaria, led by Francisco del Rosario Sanchez and Ramon Matias Mella in Duarte's absence, seized the Ozama fortress in Santo Domingo. They raised the new Dominican flag and declared independence from Haiti. This brave act marked the birth of the Dominican Republic. However, achieving independence was one thing, sustaining it was another. The new nation was weak and impoverished. It faced constant threats of reinvasion from Haiti. The early years of the Republic were defined by a desperate struggle for survival and deep internal divisions about the nation's future. This instability plagued the country for decades. The political landscape was dominated by powerful military leaders, or caudillos, who fought each other for control. Two figures, Pedro Santana and Buenaventura Baez, would rule the country for much of the 19th century. They often ruled as dictators, prioritizing their own power over the nation's well-being. Santana, fearing a Haitian invasion and distrusting his own people's ability to govern, took the drastic step of annexing the country back to Spain in 1861. This led to a guerrilla war for restoration, and independence was regained in 1865. But the pattern of political instability, economic hardship, and foreign interference was set, paving the way for even darker times ahead. The decades of political chaos created a power vacuum. In 1930, that vacuum was filled by one of the most ruthless dictators in Latin American history, Rafael Leonidas Trujillo. A former commander of the National Guard, Trujillo used his position to seize control of the country in a fraudulent election. For the next 31 years, he would rule the Dominican Republic as his personal property. His regime was a masterclass in totalitarian control. He established a vast network of spies. He controlled the press, silenced all opposition, and demanded absolute loyalty. His official title was the Benefactor, but for countless Dominicans he was anything but. Under Trujillo's rule, the Dominican Republic did see some economic development. He initiated ambitious public works projects, building roads, bridges, and hospitals. He paid off the country's foreign debt and stabilized the currency. The economy grew, and a semblance of order and modernity was imposed on the nation. However, this progress was built on a foundation of corruption and fear. Trujillo and his family amassed an enormous personal fortune. They took control of huge sectors of the economy, from salt and sugar to banking and insurance. To oppose Trujillo was to risk imprisonment, torture, or death. The brutality of the regime was infamous. One of its most horrific acts was the Parsley Massacre of 1937. On Trujillo's orders, the Dominican army systematically killed thousands of Haitians living in the border region. The massacre was a chilling example of his cruelty and racism. Within the country, his secret police eliminated anyone perceived as a threat. The most famous symbols of resistance to his rule were the Mirabal sisters. Patria, Minerva, and Maria Teresa were political activists who dared to challenge the dictator. In November 1960 they were ambushed and brutally murdered by Trujillo's henchmen. Their deaths shocked the nation and the world, galvanizing opposition to the regime. The end for Trujillo came on May 30, 1961. He was assassinated by a group of former associates and military figures. His death plunged the country back into uncertainty and chaos. He had dominated the nation for so long that no clear plan for a successor or a transition to democracy existed. The Trujillo era left deep scars on the Dominican psyche. It was a time of both superficial progress and profound trauma. The legacy of his iron-fisted rule would lead directly to the next chapter of conflict, a civil war and another foreign intervention that would once again test the resilience of the Dominican people. After Trujillo's assassination, the Dominican Republic experienced a brief but hopeful moment of democracy. In 1962, the country held its first free elections in nearly 4 decades. The winner was Juan Bosch, a reformist writer and intellectual who had spent years in exile. Bosch's government began to implement progressive policies. He drafted a new, liberal constitution that guaranteed civil liberties and land reform. However, his reforms threatened the old power structures. The military, conservative business leaders, and the Catholic Church viewed him with suspicion. They feared he was too far left, perhaps even a communist. Bosch's presidency lasted only 7 months. In September 1963 he was overthrown in a military coup. This event split the nation in two. On one side were the loyalists who supported Bosch and the 1963 Constitution. On the other were the conservative military forces who had ousted him. Tensions simmered for nearly 2 years. Then on April 24, 1965, pro-Bosch factions within the military launched a rebellion to restore him to power. This uprising quickly escalated into a full-blown civil war. The streets of Santo Domingo became a battlefield as the two sides fought for control of the country. The fighting was fierce. As the pro-Bosch constitutionalist forces gained the upper hand, the United States grew increasingly worried. President Lyndon B. Johnson, operating under the Cold War fear of another Cuba, was convinced that communists had infiltrated the rebellion. On April 28, 1965, he ordered an invasion. Over 20,000 U.S. Marines and soldiers were sent to the Dominican Republic. The official reason was to protect American lives, but the true goal was to prevent a perceived communist takeover. The intervention ended the Civil War, but it was deeply controversial. Many Dominicans saw it as another violation of their national sovereignty. Following the U.S. intervention, new elections were held in 1966. Joaquin Balaguer, who had been a puppet president under Trujillo, defeated Juan Bosch. Balaguer would go on to dominate Dominican politics for the next 3 decades. His rule was authoritarian and marked by political repression, but it also brought a period of relative stability and economic growth. It was a slow and often difficult transition, but since the mid-1990s, the Dominican Republic has made significant progress toward establishing a more stable, multi-party democracy. The nation had finally moved beyond the long shadows of dictatorship and civil war, ready to build a new future. Today, the Dominican Republic is a nation of more than 11 million people. It has one of the largest and fastest-growing economies in the Caribbean and Latin America. The country has successfully diversified its economy beyond sugar. Tourism is now a massive industry, drawing millions of visitors each year to its stunning beaches and historic sites. Free trade zones and the service sector have also become crucial pillars of economic growth. This progress has led to a rising middle class and improvements in infrastructure. The skylines of cities like Santo Domingo and Santiago are now filled with modern buildings, a visible sign of the nation's development. Dominican culture is vibrant and globally recognized. Music and dance are the lifeblood of the nation. Merengue, with its fast-paced rhythm, and bachata, with its themes of love and heartbreak, are national treasures that have become popular worldwide. The country also has a deep passion for baseball. The sport is more than a game. It is a source of national pride and a pathway out of poverty for many young men. Dominican players like Juan Marichal, Pedro Martinez, and David Ortiz have become legends in Major League Baseball, inspiring generations of children back home. This cultural output is a powerful expression of the Dominican spirit. Despite these achievements, the nation faces significant challenges. Poverty and inequality remain persistent problems. A large gap exists between the wealthy elite and the poor. Many Dominicans struggle with access to quality education, healthcare, and reliable electricity. Government corruption is another major issue that hinders progress and erodes public trust. The relationship with neighboring Haiti continues to be complex and often tense, particularly concerning issues of migration and citizenship. These are difficult problems that the country must continue to address as it moves forward in the 21st century. Yet, what stands out most is the overwhelming sense of pride Dominicans have in their country and their identity. It is a pride born from a history of struggle and survival. They are proud of their unique cultural blend, the mix of European, African, and Tino roots that makes them who they are. They are proud of their independence, won through sacrifice and courage. They are proud of their resilience in the face of dictators, invasions, and economic hardship. The story of the Dominican Republic is a powerful reminder that a nation's strength is not just in its economy or its military but in the unbreakable spirit of its people.